Karen Whitfield stood in my driveway at 7:42 on a Tuesday morning, waving a violation notice like it was a winning lottery ticket, telling me my garden lights were destroying the character of this neighborhood. She smiled the whole time. She actually smiled. 6 days later, code enforcement showed up on our street again, but not for me, for her. My name is Meredith Hale, and until that Tuesday, I thought I lived in a quiet, ordinary corner of the world. Maple Hollow Estates. 42 houses, 3 cul-de-sacs, 1 man-made pond that the brochure called a lake. I bought my house on Sycamore Court 4 years ago after my divorce with money I'd saved for a decade. It was small. It had good bones. And it had a backyard that faced west, which meant every evening the sky did something different, and I never got tired of watching it. I'm a landscape designer. I've spent 15 years making other people's yards beautiful, and when I finally had one of my own, I went all in. Raised beds, a stone path, and along the flower borders, 42 solar garden lights, warm white, low voltage, the kind that glow instead of glare. My nephew Danny helped me install them over a weekend in April. Total cost, $340. I remember the number because I'd budgeted carefully. I was proud of that yard. Neighbors stopped their cars to look at it. There was a rhythm to that street I'd come to love. Mrs. Alvarez next door grew tomatoes taller than her fence. The Delgados fed the neighborhood cats. On Sunday mornings, the man 3 doors down ran a leaf blower at exactly 9 a.m. Like a rooster with a gas engine, and somehow even that had become comforting. I wasn't naive about HOAs. I'd read the horror stories online, the ones about fines for the wrong shade of beige, but Maple Hollow had always seemed like the harmless kind. Low dues. A newsletter nobody read. A pool that opened Memorial Day and closed Labor Day right on schedule. Karen Whitfield had been president of the Maple Hollow Homeowners Association for 6 years. She drove a white Cadillac Escalade with a vanity plate that said HOA Boss. I am not exaggerating. I wish I were, and every evening at 6 o'clock sharp, she walked her dog Biscuit down every street in the neighborhood, clipboard tucked under one arm, cataloging what she called aesthetic infractions. Mailboxes at the wrong angle. Grass a half-inch too long. Wreaths left up 2 days past New Year's. I'd heard the stories, everyone had. But I figured if I kept my nose clean, followed the rules, paid my dues on time, Karen Whitfield would have no reason to ever knock on my door. I was wrong. And I had no idea how wrong until that Tuesday morning changed everything. It started on a Thursday in early March. I came home from a job site to find a cream-colored envelope taped to my front door, embossed with the Maple Hollow HOA seal like it was a summons from the county courthouse. Inside was a violation notice, dated March 3rd, citing Section 4. 2 of the community's covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Excessive or non-conforming exterior lighting creating a nuisance to neighboring properties. Fine, $75. Compliance deadline 7 days. I actually laughed out loud standing there in my driveway. My lights were solar, they were warm white. They pointed down into my own flower beds, not toward anyone's windows. I'd researched dark sky compliant fixtures specifically because I didn't want to bother anyone. I called the HOA office. A woman named Pam picked up, sounding tired before I'd even said hello. Karen filed it personally, Pam told me. Said she's gotten complaints from multiple neighbors about light pollution affecting their evening enjoyment of their yards. Which neighbors? I can't disclose that, Ms. Hale. That evening, right on schedule, I heard the click of a leash and the particular rhythm of Karen Whitfield's walk. Biscuit, a fat, wheezing pug, waddled up my driveway first. Karen followed, clipboard raised like a shield. Meredith, she said, not quite smiling, I hope you got my notice. I did, I said, I don't understand it. My lights are code-compliant, downward-facing, and they turn off automatically at 11. It's not really about the code, Karen said. It's about consideration. Some of us like to actually see the stars at night. Not everyone wants their whole yard lit up like a used car lot. A used car lot, 42 small solar lights along a flower bed. I bit back what I wanted to say and instead asked calmly, Karen, can you tell me which neighbors complained? I'd like to talk to them directly, see if there's something I can adjust. That's confidential, she said, and clicked her pen and walked away with Biscuit wheezing behind her. I called my sister that night, the way I always did when something got under my skin. Just pay it, she said. It's $75, not a hostage situation. I almost agreed with her. I was tired from a 9-hour install job and fighting felt like more effort than it was worth, so I paid it. I told myself it was easier than fighting. I was wrong about that too. 3 days after I paid, I ran into Karen at the mailboxes. Biscuit sniffed my shoes while Karen sorted her mail like she hadn't seen me at all. I paid the fine, I said. I saw that, smart move. She didn't look up. Karen, I'd really like to know who complained. If it's a brightness issue, I can angle the fixtures. I do this for a living. It's handled now, she said, and for the first time I heard something underneath her voice that wasn't quite confidence. It sounded, if I'm honest, a little rehearsed. She snapped her mailbox shut and walked off with Biscuit wheezing at her heels, and I stood there a long moment, feeling the particular sting of being dismissed by someone who knew she didn't have to answer to me. I told myself that was the end of it. 2 weeks later, a second notice appeared. This one claimed a pattern of continued violation and included something new, a petition, 12 signatures, demanding the removal of excessive residential lighting on Sycamore Court. I read every name twice. Half of them I didn't recognize. One was a house that had been vacant since January. The Petersons had moved to Arizona in the winter, and the place still had a for sale sign in the yard. I drove past that empty house slower than I needed to that night, just staring at the sign, doing math in my head that didn't add up. If the Petersons had moved, who signed their name, I didn't have an answer yet. But 3 days later, walking my own dog past Karen's house on Willow Bend, at an hour she was never usually outside, I saw something through a gap in her privacy fence that made me stop cold in the middle of the sidewalk. A shed, a big one. Practically brand new, and it was sitting a lot closer to her property line than any HOA rule should allow. I stood at the edge of that sidewalk with my own dog's leash going slack in my hand, staring at a shed that had no business sitting where it sat. And I felt something shift in my chest, not quite hope yet more like the first click of a lock starting to turn. I didn't say a word to anyone, not yet. I just started taking pictures, dated and time-stamped, saved in a folder on my phone I labeled, half joking at the time, Karen. I had no idea that Tuesday night just how full that folder was about to get. The third notice came by certified mail, which meant I had to sign for it at the post office, which meant Karen Whitfield wanted me to feel it in my hands before I even opened it. Inside, a formal demand. Remove all non-conforming lighting fixtures within 10 days, or accrue a fine of $50 per day, capped at $1,500, with the difference placed as a lien against my property if unpaid. A lien over garden lights. I sat at my kitchen table with that letter for a long time, the certified mail receipt still stapled to the corner, my coffee going cold beside it. $1,500 was real money. A lien on my house was worse than real money. It was the kind of thing that shows up on a title search years later and makes a buyer's lawyer start asking questions. I thought about just taking the lights down, boxing them up. Letting Karen win a fight over $42 worth of solar bulbs, because it would be simpler than whatever was coming next. Then I thought about that shed behind her fence, and the fence around her pool that looked a few inches too short, and the way her voice had sounded rehearsed at the mailboxes. Something about this had never really been about brightness. I stopped being embarrassed and I got organized. I pulled the full HOA bylaws, not the summary sheet they hand out at closing, the actual 61-page document, the one buried in my closing paperwork from 4 years ago. I read section 4.2 in full context this time, not just the sentence quoted in the notice. And I found section 7.1 3 pages later. Enforcement of these covenants shall be applied uniformly across all properties within the association without exception. Uniformly, across all properties. I thought about that shed behind Karen's privacy fence. I called the county planning department the next morning at 8:01, right when the office opened, and waited on hold for 11 minutes listening to a recording about brush collection schedules. When a clerk finally picked up, I asked one simple question. What's the required setback for an accessory structure over 100 square feet in a residential zone? She didn't even have to look it up. 5 feet from the property line, she said, same as it had been for a decade. I drove past Karen's house again that afternoon, this time with a tape measure and a very good excuse. I told her neighbor, sweet old Mr. Delgado, I was just admiring his azaleas. From the sidewalk, using landmarks I could measure discreetly, that shed looked like it was sitting closer to 3 feet. I also remembered something else. Karen had a pool. Everyone did, it was that kind of neighborhood. But pool fences in our county needed to be at least 48 inches high with a self-latching gate. Karen's fence, from what I could see over the top of her hedge, looked shorter than that, maybe 42 inches, maybe less. And then there was the guest house. Karen had converted the detached garage behind her main house into what she called a she-shed on the neighborhood Facebook group, complete with a kitchenette and a fold-out bed. And as I later confirmed through public permit records, which are free to search online. By the way, no permit on file for a residential conversion. No permit meant no inspection. No inspection meant nobody had checked the wiring, the plumbing, or whether it met code for a dwelling unit at all. I didn't march over and confront her. I didn't need to. I did something better. I filed a formal written request with the HOA board citing Section 7. 1 directly, asking for a uniform compliance inspection of every property on our 3 streets, mine included, to be conducted by the association's contracted third-party inspector, the same one whose signature was on my own violation notices. I wanted my lights inspected. I wanted everyone's yard inspected, equally. Uniformly, exactly as written in the bylaws Karen herself had signed off on as president. The board couldn't say no without looking exactly like what they were. The inspection was scheduled for a Saturday in early April, 9 in the morning, starting at the top of Sycamore Court and working block by block. I watched from my porch with a cup of coffee as the inspector, a calm, unbothered man named Rick Alvarez, with a clipboard far more official than Karen's ever was, moved from house to house. My lights took him 4 minutes. He measured the beam angle, checked the timer, confirmed everything matched the dark sky compliant specs printed right on the box, which I still had. No violation here, he said, and wrote it down and moved on. Then he reached Willow Bend. I wasn't there for that part, obviously. But by Monday, the whole neighborhood was talking, because Rick Alvarez's full report went out to every homeowner as required under the same transparency clause Karen had used against me a dozen times. The shed on Karen's property was measured at 2 feet 9 inches from the property line, nearly 2 feet short of the required setback. Her pool fence measured 41 inches, 7 short of code, with a gate that didn't self-latch at all. And the detached she shed had no permit on file whatsoever, which the report noted in careful county language meant the structure's use as habitable space was presently unauthorized and subject to further review. Word travels fast on a street with 1 shared Facebook group and too much free time. By Wednesday night, someone had printed Rick's report and taped it to the community mailbox kiosk, right where Karen's violation notices usually got read by everyone but the person they were addressed to. I heard later that Karen took it down within the hour. It didn't matter. Half the neighborhood had already photographed it on their phones. The HOA board meeting that Thursday was the most crowded I'd ever seen it, folding chairs pulled from the clubhouse closet, lined up 3 deep along the back wall. The overhead projector humming louder than usual in a room that smelled like stale coffee and new carpet. Karen sat at the head of the table, clipboard in front of her, but for the first time since I'd moved to Maple Hollow, she wasn't the one holding it like a weapon. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, when Rick's report came up on the projector. "That shed was there when I bought the house. The permit records show it was built 2 years ago," Rick said flatly, not unkindly. "There's a timestamped satellite image in the report, page 4. The pool fence is temporary," Karen tried next. "We're replacing it." "The complaint against Ms. Hale's garden lights was filed the same week the fence photo was taken," said a board member I'd never heard speak before, a quiet man named Otis who apparently kept better minutes than anyone gave him credit for. "That's an interesting coincidence." I didn't say much at all. I didn't need to. I sat in the 3rd row and let the report speak for itself, the way Karen's own notices had spoken for themselves against me for 6 weeks. By the following Tuesday, Karen Whitfield had 30 days to bring her shed, her fence, and her guest house into full compliance or face fines, identical to the ones she'd tried to put on me, $50 a day, capped at $1,500 with a lien to follow. The board voted 5-2 to open a formal review of her conduct as president, after 3 other homeowners came forward with notices they'd quietly paid rather than fight. She resigned 2 weeks later, not because anyone forced her out with pitchforks, nothing that dramatic. She just stopped showing up to meetings. And when the annual election rolled around in May, nobody nominated her, and she didn't nominate herself. Otis, the quiet board member with the good minutes, took over as interim president, and one of his first changes was posting every inspection report publicly for every property going forward. No exceptions, no confidential complaints. He said the word uniformly out loud at that first meeting like he'd been waiting 6 years to use it. I paid Karen's $1,500 fine a strange kind of respect in the end. It's the exact number she once tried to put on me. My garden lights are still up. 42 of them, warm and low along the flower beds, and last month a woman 2 streets over asked me who designed my yard, because she wanted the same look for hers. I told her the truth. I told her it never had anything to do with the lights at all. What it had to do with was somebody deciding the rules only pointed one direction, and forgetting that rules, real ones, actually written down in black and white, tend to point back. I still have that first violation notice, the cream-colored envelope with the embossed seal, folded up in a kitchen drawer. Some nights I take it out just to remind myself how close I came to just quietly boxing up my lights and letting it go. I think about the version of that spring where I paid the $1,500, took the lights down, and never once opened those 61 pages of bylaws sitting in my closet. That version of me never finds Section 7.1. That version of Karen is still walking biscuit past my dark flower beds every evening at 6, clipboard raised, looking for the next thing to write down. I'm glad I'm not her. If you've ever been the person on the receiving end of a rule that only seemed to apply to you, you already know exactly how that first cup of coffee tasted the Saturday the inspector walked my street. If this story felt familiar, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, you know exactly what to do next.